You're listening to The Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the latest and greatest in sports as only he can. Follow him on Twitter @RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Valk.
Hello, sports fans. Welcome to another edition of the Jacob Valk Show. I am the Jacob Valk, except no imitation. I've got to start with the Jaguars hiring Doug Peterson as their head coach. In addition to that, the Jaguars, according to Jonathan Jones of CBS Sports, will hire Rick Spielman to a position that will have him reporting directly to the owner, Shad Khan. He will be above the GM, Trent Baalke. So there is a new hierarchy in place in Jacksonville. While Baalke will still be there, presumably he won't have the final say in football-related decisions. And I think this is a great move by the Jaguars. I think they're doing this right. Forget the fact that the Byron Leftwich and Adrian Wilson pairing didn't end up materializing, okay? Would that have worked too? The answer is yes. But what was the biggest issue that the Jaguars had last year? Urban Meyer. As we know, he failed miserably in Jacksonville, one of the worst head coaches in NFL history. What was the main reason that he failed? You can point to specific instances, but basically, they all fall under the same umbrella. His inexperience. Meyer had never played in the NFL before, had never coached in the NFL before. Then he goes to the Jaguars, knows nothing about how to connect with these guys, and it fails miserably, okay? I thought it could have worked. I was dead wrong. Like I said, he's one of the worst head coaches in NFL history. What is this new hierarchy bring to Jacksonville? Experience. And some of the best experience you can possibly have. Doug Peterson is a Super Bowl winning head coach. How often do you have the opportunity to hire a Super Bowl winning head coach? How often do you have the opportunity to hire someone that made Carson Wentz look like an MVP and led Nick Foles to Super Bowl MVP? How often does that happen? Before his last year in Philly, which was a complete disaster. Alright, we can all agree that that season went about as poorly as possible. But before that season, Peterson had never finished worse than 7-9. The Jaguars would sign up for 7-9 in a minute. They have only finished with a record better than 7-9 once since 2011. Doug Peterson knows what it takes to succeed in the NFL. The Jaguars have no one in their organization that I can say that about, with the exception of Peterson and Rick Spielman. I can't say that about Trent Baalke. Trent Baalke was a terrible GM. Trent Baalke ran Jim Harbaugh out of San Francisco. He made disastrous decisions. Aaron Wilson of ProFootballNetwork.com said that Byron Leftwich balked at being paired with Baalke. I understand why. And also, I'll say this. I know I reported on the Leftwich and Wilson pairing in essence being a done deal. Obviously, that's not what's going to happen. Do I feel bad about giving you wrong information? The answer is yes, I am sorry about that. But the thing is, it came from a reputable source. It wasn't johnsfootballwebsite.com. No, it came from someone with intimate knowledge of the Arizona Cardinals, where Adrian Wilson currently works. Okay, at the end of the day, all I can do is report stories from reputable sources. Sometimes they don't end up materializing, but in this business, you're going to report on stories that aren't true. The only thing that you can do if you're in my seat is say it came from this person, a reputable source. All I did was report it. I mean, one thing I could have said is it's not a done deal, but if it happens, blah, blah, blah. But again, if it comes from a reputable source, I don't feel bad about reporting on it. I feel bad about giving you misinformation. Again, I'm sorry about that, but in my defense, all I did was report on a story from someone with intimate knowledge of the Arizona Cardinals. I really can't be faulted for that. But back to Peterson. What's the biggest thing the Jaguars need if they're going to be successful in the near future? For Trevor Lawrence to turn into the franchise quarterback that we all think he can be. I have not met one person who has said that Trevor Lawrence is a bust. Did he have a disappointing rookie season? The answer is yes, but no one's giving up on him. So how do we get this guy to the next level? It starts with the coach. It starts with putting someone in place that can develop him. If there's one thing that Doug Peterson can do, it's develop quarterbacks. Let me give you a few examples of Peterson's excellence in developing quarterbacks. Carson Wentz in 2017 was probably going to be MVP. If he didn't get hurt, I think it's a safe bet to say he would have won MVP. Nick Foles comes in, plays really well, goes 2-1 in the regular season, certainly doesn't embarrass himself. No one thinks that they're going to beat the Falcons. They beat the Falcons. No one thinks that they're going to beat the Vikings. They destroy the Vikings. No one thinks they're going to beat the Patriots. They beat the Patriots. Foles wins Super Bowl MVP. In 2018, Wentz completed 69.5% of his passes for over 3,000 yards, 21 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions in only 11 games. Foles was really good in relief of Wentz. He went 4-1. They knocked off the Bears in the wild card round. A great pass by Nick Foles. Then they lost to the Saints in the divisional round. In 2019, with Wentz playing 16 games, he completed just under 64% of his passes for over 4,000 yards, 27 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions. Wentz's last year in Philly, everything went wrong. There's no question. There was a disconnect between Doug Peterson and Howie Roseman that started with the Jalen Hurts pick. The offensive line was putrid. Wentz had a dreadful season, led the NFL in interceptions, got sacked 50 times. Wentz ended up being benched for Jalen Hurts through the final 4 games of the season. And Hurts wasn't awful. Wasn't great, but certainly wasn't awful. The biggest issue that anyone can have with Peterson is what happened at the end of the season. In the fourth quarter of Washington-Philly on Sunday Night Football, a very important game for two teams. If Washington wins, they're in the playoffs. If Washington loses, the Giants are in the playoffs. Washington was up 17-14 to start the fourth quarter. Jalen Hurts was not setting the world on fire. He completed only 7 of his 20 passes for 72 yards. He threw an interception. He had 8 carries for 34 yards and 2 touchdowns, but he was dreadful with his arm. In the fourth quarter, the Eagles decided to put in Nate Sudfeld. Just to give some context, Nate Sudfeld hadn't thrown a pass in the NFL since week 17 of the 2018 season. So this guy is now playing in the fourth quarter of a winnable game for the Eagles and an incredibly meaningful game for two teams. Sudfeld was dreadful. Went 5 for 12 for only 32 yards. He threw an interception. He lost a fumble. Washington went on to win 20-14. The Eagles tanked that game. There's no question about that. I had no problem with them doing that. At the end of the day, they're not beholden to the Giants. Losing that game gave the Eagles the 6th overall pick. They ended up trading down with the Dolphins and then trading back up to draft Devontae Smith. I think it's safe to say that decision worked out for the Eagles. The question that needs to be answered is this: whose decision was it to tank? Was it Doug Peterson's? Was it Howie Roseman's? Was it Jeffrey Lurie's? Was it a combination of the three? What exactly happened? Because if Doug Peterson went into that game knowing that he was going to do whatever it took to lose, including benching his quarterback for a clearly inferior quarterback, say what you want about Jalen Hurts, but he's a million times better than Nate Sudfeld. That's a problem. There were rumors that the players had turned against him. It was just a terrible look for him. No one remembers this. There was a report that came out before that game started that said that the Eagles wanted to get a look at Nate Sudfeld. Okay, fair enough. You're allowed to want to get a look at Nate Sudfeld to see if he can be your long-term backup. But On his first drive, he threw an interception. After a timeout, too. What did he do on the next drive? Fumbled the ball away to Chase Young. There was one pass where Sudfeld threw a pass to, I think it was Boston Scott, where Scott hadn't even turned around to locate the ball. Sudfeld threw it into his back. You have Chris Collinsworth going nuts on the broadcast. Al Michaels was too. They had every right to. At the end of the day, you gotta look at Nate Sudfeld for 2 drives. And it's clear he's just not an NFL quarterback. So go back to Jalen Hurts. You keep trotting him out there. I mean, my God. It was a joke. Giants fans were furious. Oh, how are you going to pull that stunt when we have a chance to make the playoffs? Oh, I'm going to drive down to Philly and protest, blah, blah, blah. Meanwhile, all those fans were ignoring all the winnable games that the Giants lost prior to that game. If the Giants win just one more game, they're never beholden to the Eagles. That's why you always want to control your own destiny. Look, if we find out that Doug Peterson was the one who came up with that idea to throw away that fourth quarter, he should never be a coach in the NFL again. Alright, there's a reason that people are taking these pay for tanking allegations by Brian Flores and Hugh Jackson so seriously. It's one thing if you're going to go into the season with a subpar roster, but, you know, you're going to give it all you got every Sunday. You'll win a few games and you'll be happy. Similar to what happened with the Jets this year. That's one thing. Okay, that's not tanking. No one has an issue with that. But if the owner is going to pay the coach to lose games, that is an affront to everything that we love about sports. So again, if Doug Peterson went into that game saying, you know what? I'm going to do whatever I can to lose this game. We're in position to win this game in the fourth quarter. I want to lose. That's what's better for my team in the long run. We're going to lose this game. That's wrong. You play to win the game, in the immortal words of Herm Edwards. That's unfair to your players. It's unfair to your fans. It's unfair to everyone. But, and this is important, if Doug Peterson was just executing orders from someone like Howie Roseman or Jeffrey Lurie, you can't begrudge him for that. Again, odds are we'll never know for sure who really came up with that idea to have Sudfeld play the entire fourth quarter regardless of anything. But if it was someone higher up, you can't fault Peterson for doing what his bosses tell him. You want to tell me Peterson doesn't strike you as the kind of guy who would go along with that? That may have been a last-ditch effort to save his job. Okay, we've had these disagreements, but I'm going to do this. It's going to look bad for me, but I'm going to do it to show that I'm a team player and to put you in as good a position as possible in the draft. Like I said, we'll never know for sure what really happened leading up to that decision. I'll say this. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. I don't think any coach will ever sign up for tanking. I mean, if what Brian Flores said is true, that's just evidence to my point that coaches won't tank regardless of the circumstances. Same thing with Hugh Jackson. I don't buy the Jackson allegations, though. I think that's just him trying to cover up his terrible coaching. You want to talk about the Mount Rushmore of bad NFL head coaches? This is the correct Mount Rushmore of bad NFL coaches. Urban Meyer, Bobby Petrino, Hugh Jackson, and Marion Campbell. You want to put a guy like Rod Rust in there? You can. But I kind of like the Mount Rushmore being 2 one-and-done coaches and 2 coaches that actually lasted a while. Jackson coached for 3.5 seasons. Marion Campbell coached for 9 seasons. So yeah, I don't buy the Jackson allegation. But look, coaches aren't going to tank. Because at the end of the day, losing reflects negatively on them. What's the one job of the coach? To win. No coach is going to say, sure thing, boss, I'll lose this game on purpose, when the fans are going to go nuts. And they're going to call for the coach's head because he lost this game. There were a ton of fans in Philly that wanted Doug Peterson out. No coach is going to willingly sign up for that. So no, I don't believe that Peterson was the one who decided to throw that game away. I do think he was just executing orders. Now you may be asking yourself, if Peterson executing his front office's orders resulted in him being fired, how's that going to change with Trent Baalke still being there? Well, like I said, Rick Spielman is probably going to have a title over Baalke. You remember when I said the biggest issue the Jaguars had last year was lack of experience? Rick Spielman has a wealth of front office experience. Rick Spielman knows what it takes to build an NFL team. This guy was GM of the Vikings from 2012 to 2021. In his years there, the Vikings never finished worse than 5-10-1. And they only did that once. They had a couple 7-9 seasons in there. They had some 8-win seasons. But they were in the playoffs 4 times. They were always in the playoff mix. Spielman did a great job of adding talent. Alright, he signed Kirk Cousins. He kept Anthony Barr. He drafted Dalvin Cook. He drafted Justin Jefferson. He brought in Adam Thielen. This guy knows talent. I think Spielman and Peterson will get along. In fact, Spielman and Peterson share an agent. So it's very possible that that agent orchestrated a phone call between the two and said, here's what's going to happen. Do you think you guys can work together? I think you can, but what do you guys think? If the answer is yes, home run for the Jaguars. I think this is a great job by the Jaguars. They have 2 NFL veterans leading the way now. You have a really good executive in Spielman. Someone who should have been in the mix for every open GM job this cycle. and you have a Super Bowl winning head coach. All the teams out there that have hired head coaches don't have that. Matt Eberflus, no. Nate Hackett, no. Josh McDaniels, no. Kevin O'Connell, no. And Brian Daboll, no. I mean, suddenly the Jaguars have one of the best hierarchies in the NFL. Spielman and Peterson is a lot better than a lot of current lead executive and head coach duos. I really think this is going to work. I really think Peterson's the right guy to unleash Trevor Lawrence. I understand that I was high on the Urban Meyer hire last year. Hey, I got that wrong. No question about that. But I really, really think that Spielman and Peterson are the right guys to correct the Jaguars. Moving on now to an interesting statement from Brad Holmes, the Lions GM. He said that the Lions are definitely open for business in terms of trading the second overall pick. So now, all of a sudden, the floodgates are going to open. You're going to have a ton of teams interested in trading up. You're going to have a lot of fans getting excited. You're going to have a bunch of trade conjectures. The barn door is now open, and the horses have ran 6 furlongs. There are a lot of ways that you need to look at this. Let's start with the second overall pick itself. Who can be had with that pick? See, this is not the greatest draft ever. This is actually a relatively weak draft. There are a lot of players in this draft that I think are going to be really, really, really good players. Alright, I think they're going to make multiple Pro Bowls, but as far as being like super duper stars, no, I don't see that. I like Kayvon Thibodeau, I like Aiden Hutchinson, I like Evan Neal, I like Kyle Hamilton, I like Derek Stingley, Ikem Ekwonu, Nakobe Dean, Tyler Linderbaum. You know, guys like that, Kenny Pickett, I like those guys. I don't see any super duper stars there. I don't see any future Hall of Famers. I don't see anyone with a Hall of Fame ceiling. So look, if you're not in love with any of these guys, trade down. The Lions need a ton of help. They have no wide receivers. They have no defense. Get as many picks as you can. Yes, there are no fantastic players, but there are a lot of really good players. So if given the choice between one really good player or multiple really good players, what direction do you think you're going to go in? You're going to want multiple really good players. I mean, I'll say this. I know we've heard the names Evan Neal and Ikem Ekwonu bandied about for who the Jaguars could take at 1. I don't see it. I think there's a clear-cut top 2 in this draft. And then there's everyone else. I think that top 2 is Kayvon Thibodeau and Aiden Hutchinson in that order. I understand wanting to protect Trevor Lawrence, but at the same time, if you have the opportunity to get a wrecking ball on defense to help a really, really bad unit, you've got to take it. If anyone from this draft is going to turn into a Hall of Famer, it's going to be Thibodeau and/or Hutchinson. I mean, it's very close between Thibodeau and Hutchinson. The reason that I'm putting Thibodeau ahead of Hutchinson is pretty simple. I don't see Hutchinson getting much better than this. I think Hutchinson's going to be a really, really, really good player in the NFL. But once he gets to the NFL, I think he's going to hit the ground running, but not get a ton better. He's going to be really, really good, but I don't think he's going to take that jump to great. Maybe he'll go from like a 7 to an 8. Kayvon Thibodeau, I feel like, has the higher ceiling. I feel like there's a lot more talent there to unearth. See, one thing about Hutchinson is he's a senior. Thibodeau isn't. Thibodeau's also a little younger. Only by a few months, but still, he's a little younger. I think Hutchinson's going to come into the NFL and immediately be better. Like I said, he's going to start at a 7 and may get to an 8. Thibodeau, I think, will start at a 6, but has the potential to get to 9. I hope that made sense. It makes sense in my head. So let's say Thibodeau goes 1. You have Aiden Hutchinson on the board. Ann Arbor is only about 40 miles west of Detroit. Your fan base would be going nuts. They'd be ecstatic. They'd buy his jersey that night. There is something to be said about drafting the hometown hero. Joe Burrow was the hometown hero. That worked out pretty well. I mean, Hutchinson would be the best player available by far if the draft unfolded that way. See, there are some drafts, and this doesn't happen a lot, but there are some drafts where it's better to have the second overall pick than the first overall pick. Think about it. If it's a 2-man race for that first overall pick, you really can't afford to get it wrong. But once one guy is off the board, your pick at 2 becomes really easy. Okay, we were going to take one of these 2, whichever one was still on the board. This guy's off the board, so we're going to take the other guy. There, done. Fantastic. Very easy. We have these guys very close to each other. We're happy to take the one still on the board. Think back to the 2010 NHL draft. Taylor versus Tyler. There was a real debate on who would be the first overall pick. The Oilers ended up taking Taylor Hall. Very tough decision, but they ended up going with Taylor over Tyler. So what do the Bruins do at 2? They take Tyler. Very easy. Taylor's off the board, we're going to take Tyler. If Tyler's off the board, we're going to take Taylor. Very, very easy. Things get thrown out of whack if the Jaguars throw a curveball at 1 and they take Evan Neal or they take Ikem Ekwonu. But if the draft unfolds the way I think it will, with Kayvon Thibodeau going 1, or even Aiden Hutchinson going 1, it's a pretty obvious choice at 2. You take either Hutchinson or Thibodeau, whichever one is still available. So look, could the Lions trade down? The answer is yes. They need a ton of help. There's no superstar available. So this is the draft to trade down. I would have no problem with the Lions trading down. I'll say this, though. I don't want the Jets to trade up. I don't think they need to. If you're going to trade up to 2, it's going to be for either Hutchinson or Thibodeau. Okay, you're not trading up for Evan Neal if you're the Jets. And you're not trading up for Ikem Ekwonu. And if I'm butchering his name, I'm sorry, but I think I got it right. He'll still be on the board at 4. You would only trade up for Hutchinson or Thibodeau. The Jets don't need Hutchinson or Thibodeau. Their D-line is set. John Franklin Myers, Quinnen Williams, Foley Fatukasi, who I want back, and Carl Lawson. I know that Robert Saleh likes to rotate his D linemen, but now you're telling me you want to spend the first or second overall pick on a guy who's only going to play like 30 or 40 snaps a game? No, that's not going to work. I don't want the Jets to take Hutchinson or Thibodeau at 2. I'll say this, though. I said that Kayvon Thibodeau is the best player in this draft. If he is still on the board at 4, and I've seen some mock drafts that have him slipping to 4. Not a ton, but I have seen some. If that happens, take Thibodeau, okay? I fully understand that. If the best player in this draft slips to 4, you need to take him. But all in all, I really think the draft is going to be this, in the top 3. Thibodeau 1, he has the highest ceiling out of anyone in this draft. Aiden Hutchinson, the Michigan star, stays in Michigan. Evan Neal at 3. It seems like the Texans want to build around Davis Mills. If you're going to do that, you need to give him a great O-line. The Texans' O-line last year was dreadful. Everyone not named Justin Britt was absolutely useless. So take Neal at 3 if you're going to build around Davis Mills. So that means that the Jets are on the clock. I know I said in my Jets offseason preview that I wanted the Jets to take Nakobe Dean at 4. The thing is, though, the more I look at Ekwonu, the more I like him at 4. He is the most athletic offensive lineman in this draft. I think he has a ton of upside. He's a mauler. He's deceptively strong. He's a little raw, but that's okay. That just means that the Jets need to coach him up a little bit. And the Jets did a good job of that last year. Their O-line wasn't bad last year. George Fant was a really good left tackle. AVT had a really good rookie season. Connor McGovern was solid. Greg Van Roten was useless. Okay, I'll give you that. But Morgan Moses was really good. So I'll take Ekwonu. And Ekwonu can play right guard. I don't know if he's ever played right guard before, but he's very, very versatile. I know he played left tackle and left guard at NC State. He strikes me as the kind of guy who you could put anywhere on the O-line and he'd be fine. So I'll take Ekwonu at 4. I have no problem with that. And then, please, Nakobe Dean slip to 10. Think back to the off-season preview. What holes did I identify on the Jets? A wide receiver. Not impossible at 10, but you can get a wide receiver later in this draft and you're okay. There's not a huge gap between the best wide receiver in this draft and, like, the 10th best wide receiver in this draft. We've got a lot of really good players, no great ones. Tight end, no. Right guard, yes. Ikem Ekwonu. A 4-3 linebacker to play with Quincy Williams and C.J. Mosley. Enter Nakobe Dean. Cornerback, no. I see them filling that hole in free agency. The Jets could stand to add some corners. There's no question about that. But it's not a glaring enough hole that I'd add one in the top 10. Just sign a guy like J.C. Jackson or someone like that and you're fine. Rasul Douglas would make sense. Just sign a corner and draft a corner a little later in the draft. You can do that. And safety, just sign Marcus Williams or Jordan Whitehead and you're fine. I mean, there's no great 4-3 linebacker that you can sign in free agency. You could sign a guy like Mark Lewinsky to play right guard. That would make sense. But I'd get more excited about Ekwonu. I really like him. I think he fits the Jets perfectly. I don't mind drafting an offensive lineman in the first round for a third straight year. Protect Zach Wilson. Put as many pieces around him as possible to make him successful. I don't mind that. The more I think about it, the more I really like Ekwonu at 4 and Dean at 10. But again, just to go back to the main story, if the Lions are going to trade down, I don't mind it. They have a ton of holes to fill, and this isn't the greatest draft ever. I just hope that the team that trades up to 2 takes either Thibodeau or Hutchinson. Those are the only guys who I would trade up for, if I'm going to make that massive move to 2. I'll close this show out with some NBA Valk talk. Specifically, the massive trade between the Clippers and Trailblazers. The Blazers traded Robert Covington and Norman Powell to the Clippers for Eric Bledsoe, Justice Winslow, Keon Johnson, and the Pistons second rounder in 2025. There are a lot of things to break down here. The Clippers were just trying to tread water until Kawhi Leonard and Paul George got back. But a report just came out that said that Kawhi probably won't be back this year. And who knows when Paul George is coming back. So you're in a tough spot right now if you're the Clippers. You're without your two best players right now, but you're firmly in the playoff mix. You're the 8th seed right now. So it's not like you're going to blow things up. You want to try and get better now? And put yourself in as good a position as possible to be better next year when Leonard and George are hopefully at 100%? Well, the Clippers just did that. Norman Powell is an incredibly underrated player. And he's been underrated for a really long time. Here's a guy with 3 straight seasons averaging at least 16 points. Really good shooter. This year he's averaging 18.7 points per game, 3.3 rebounds per game, and 2.1 assists per game, while shooting just over 45.5% from the field and just over 40.5% from beyond the arc. What's one thing that the Clippers really don't have without Kawhi and Paul George? Scorers. I know what Reggie Jackson did last night against the Lakers. That was crazy, but he's only averaging 16.7 points per game this year. I don't want to say that Norman Powell can be your primary bucket getter if you're going to do special things in the playoffs. But he can certainly be the secondary bucket getter. I have no problem with that. He could even be the tertiary bucket getter. Look, Paul George will be back at some point this year. I don't know when, but this puts the Clippers in a really good spot for this year to make a little bit of noise. I'm not saying they're going to knock off either the Suns or the Warriors, but would it stun you if they gave the Suns or the Warriors a run for their money? I could see that series going 6 games. I mean, Robert Covington is a really good 3-and-D guy. We know that the Clippers lost their 2 best scorers, with Kawhi and George being out, but they also lost their 2 best defenders. Enter Robert Covington. Someone who's struggling shooting this year. He's averaging 7.6 points per game, 5.7 rebounds per game, and 1.4 assists per game. His field goal percentage is atrocious, the worst it's ever been in the NBA, 38.1%. And his 3-point percentage is really bad too, 34.3%. But last year, he shot 37.9% from beyond the arc. He has the talent to put the 3 in 3-and-D. And he's still a really, really good defender. Can guard every position, can get into the passing lanes, can make everyone work, can block shots. Robert Covington is one of those guys who can play a meaningful role on a team that's gonna make some noise in the playoffs. Now again, I don't see the Clippers making a ton of noise in the playoffs. I think they'll get into the playoffs. I think they'll survive the play-in tournament. But best case scenario, they lose in 6 games. Next year, though, when Kawhi comes back and George comes back, and you add Norman Powell to that mix, wow, that team just got scary. Think about this starting lineup for a minute. Reggie Jackson, Norman Powell, Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, and Ivica Zubac. I could even see you running a small ball lineup with Rocco at the 5. I understand that Covington is going to be a free agent at the end of this season, but you know that the Clippers are probably going to make a concerted effort to bring him back. I don't see them trading for him, given their current situation, just to say, yeah, no, we're going to let you walk. I think the Clippers view Covington as a key part of their future. So the Clippers could conceivably run a lineup with George, Leonard, and Covington on the floor at the same time. You could even move George up to the 2 and Covington goes to the 3. If you want. The possibilities are endless. You're not scoring against that lineup. George, Covington, and Leonard on the floor at the same time? Good luck. The possibilities are endless, and they're really exciting to think about. As for the Blazers, you gotta think that this is the start of things to come. They just traded their 3rd best player and either their 5th or 6th best player, depending on how you feel about Anthony Simons. If the Trailblazers are willing to trade them and get realistically only Keon Johnson back, because how much does Eric Bledsoe excite you? Bledsoe's a good player, not great. Justice Winslow's having a bad season. If you're trading Powell and Covington for a package headlined by Keon Johnson, what does that mean for Damian Lillard? What does that mean for CJ McCollum? I understand that Lillard is hurt right now, but you can still trade an injured player. I understand that he would need to clear a physical, and it gets a little dicey, but if you could pull off a trade for Damian Lillard, I think you'd take the chance. And I think the Blazers have to be open to that now. They've already opened the floodgates by trading Powell and Covington. It's not a stretch to assume that they'd at least entertain offers for Lillard at this point. CJ McCollum, too. You gotta think could be on the move. McCollum may be a little more likely than Lillard, since McCollum's healthy right now. Yusuf Nurkic as well. Again, you're trading your 3rd and either 5th or 6th best player for Eric Bledsoe, who's not going to help you in the future. A solid player, but nowhere near as good as Powell, and I don't think he's as good as Covington. Justice Winslow, who's not that good. Keon Johnson, who I think can turn into something, but the jury's still out. And a 2nd rounder that's going to convey in 2025. If you're doing that, it's not a stretch to assume that McCollum, Nurkic, and or Lillard could all go in the next 6 days. The trade deadline is February 10th at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. It would not knock my socks off if the Blazers blew things up further. But if I'm looking at this trade right now, it's great for the Clippers. They got better this year and didn't give up a ton to do it. They also got a couple players who can help them next year. Worst comes to worst, it's just Norman Powell, but I do think they're going to bring Robert Covington back. And that defense with him, Kawhi, and George on the floor at the same time will be lethal. Excellent job by the Clippers. They easily win this trade. You'll get a Brooklyn Nets show on Monday night. Holy moly, is there a lot to talk about. Just when you think it couldn't get any worse, a million other things happen. Regular episodes of the Jacob Valk Show come your way every weekday afternoon. Thursday's show will be posted after the NBA trade deadline is all said and done. I want to make sure that I break down all the trades that come down the pipeline. Until next time, I'm Jacob Valk, and always remember, if you disagree with me, you're wrong.